I interviewed end of 2009. I interviewed with One East, started, I think, right around Christmas time. And so I have a lot of positive memories framing, thinking about this time of year, and then kind of launching into the next year with, how I'm looking at things, I'm approaching things. Also, it's for me this time of year generally, and my goals this year I hit by September. And I try to do that every year. Now, one of the things that wasn't on my list and will be going forward is running I'm going to come back to the math on that in a second. But my goal is normally to hit my goals. And as a rep, this isn't really relevant because this isn't a luxury you get, but you do at the ownership level. And certainly as you go, my goal is to hit my goals by the end of October. So my birthday is November 3rd. And then we go into Thanksgiving, we go into Christmas. My goal is the last 2 months of the year, I go from working 50, 60-hour weeks, and not because I necessarily have to, it's because I love what I do. So it isn't so I'm not a huge proponent of work crazy hours. And it's 50, 60, by the way, not crazy. I know a lot of people that work 80 to 100 hours a week. So, but I don't work that because I have to per se. I genuinely love what I do. So I think the art of life is to get to a point where you don't make a lot of distinction between work and play. Right. And where they're fairly integrated. And by the way, if you're like, yeah, that'll be great when I get out of the field. I was that way in the field. I enjoyed my field time. And part of it was I was building my business. So as long as I'm growing and I'm building, I'm happy. And so I knew where I had to start. I knew how the game was built. And so I found a lot of joy in the field. And that helped me a lot. And I've always kind of carried that attitude on. But I don't make that distinction. There isn't a lot of distinction in my life between work and play, but I frame it that way so people understand it. But this time of year, I scale down to 30 hours a week in office, although this year I'm doing more because we have some big initiatives as an ICL that I need to get done. And we have some really big opportunities coming for everybody that I need to be more engaged with on the ICL level. So, and I'll swing back to that in a second. But this time of year, I start to reflect on the last year. What were my outcomes? What were the things I was trying to hit? So a big one this year was senior national consultant. I was very org focused, making sure we ramped up and hit that. We fucking crushed it. Overall, the org is doing pretty well. But for me, if I'm going to be in the game, I want to run a top performing ICL. And this last couple of years, I turned over a lot of my ICL duties to my assistant manager and the other managers in my office. And I've ran an okay ICL. It's been it just hasn't been great. Not by my standards of great, especially now where we've seen a 50% increase in commission. Running a $2 million business now would be like running a $1.2, $1.4 million business 5 years ago. And so it's, and then you could go the other way with that. And so I think part of leadership, as a consultant, running an ICL is the equivalent of an owner going to the field. Does that make sense? It's at some point it doesn't make sense to do. The problem is you don't really want to get too far away from the thing that's making you money. Right. And so if I'm not running an ICL and I'm not engaged in the day-to-day, then there's certain things that I'm just not, I don't have a pulse on. And so I'm getting, anyway, circling back on that to Heshan's point, I'm getting more focused on my ICL again. And I'm hoping I'm going to do it not at the cost of my organization, because ultimately the org is far more valuable than the ICL, but I want to stay connected to what's happening ground floor as we have a lot of new initiatives coming out. I was having this conversation with Vera, and we've been working really hard to make the business better. My goal is that for every generation after mine, the business has gotten better and better for. And it certainly has, but I don't think we're anywhere near, I'm looking at the next 10 years. How do we make this business phenomenal in the next 10 years? My goal is my goal is to create as many millionaires as I possibly can in the next 10 years. And the number is very large. So how do we do that? Okay, well, we got to continue to make the business better. And so for me to do that, I still need to stay a practitioner on running how to run an ICL and stay updated on, what platforms are best to recruit on. What is, what's the best way to run a prelim right now? How are we talking to our candidates as the game is changing? So those are all things that I start thinking about, like the year ahead. Well, what are my big outcomes or big initiatives for next year? And so part of the framing for that is I look back at where I spent my time, my money, and what had my attention in 2022. And I do this every year, but I look back. So money's easy. You just go back through your bank accounts and go through your accounting, and you can see, okay, well, here's where I spent my money. Where would if I could do it over again, what would I change? Where am I spending more money than I should, or I don't want to? Wasn't a good use of money. Where's a good place to spend my money? So I want to be aware of where I spent my money, because these are all resources, right? Energy, time, and money are essentially, in my estimation, they're all essentially the same resource in different forms. And early in life, we generally have more energy and more time and less money. So we trade our energy and time for money. But you want to get to a point where your money is giving you back time and energy, right? Because your money is working harder than you are. That's the goal. And so we got to get out of trading time and money for money and making money make money. Does this make sense? And that's, being a business owner is the easiest way to do that for most people. There are exceptions, and there's always different paths, but as a whole, that is going to be your best way to get there. So I look at my time, I look at my money, so then I look at my calendar, right? And I will review my calendar for the entire year. And a useful thing I found in doing that is I generally save a year's worth of pictures on my phone. So from January to December, loosely. And I will just review the last year in pictures. And generally the things that brought me the most joy, not always, because sometimes when things really take your breath away, you're not thinking about your camera, or not thinking about taking a photo. Like, that's one of the hardest things about being more active on social media for me, is the times when people would like to really be involved with me on social media. The last thing I want to fucking do is open up my phone and be involved there. I'm involved with what I'm doing. But nonetheless, pictures are worth 1,000 words, and you can remember those amazing moments. And so, looking back this year, I'm like looking at, well, what were the things that really brought me joy? Where do I really enjoy spending my time and money? And then I methodically amplify or double down on the things that brought me joy, right? That I found fulfillment in, and I reduce the things that didn't. Now, before I go too far with this, there are things you have to do as an adult that may or may not bring you a lot of joy, right? And some of that is a frame of reference, and you have to reframe how you're looking at what you're doing. But there are things that are either unnecessary, or when you look at it, you did it out of obligation, or you said yes to things that you're like, why did I say yes to that? So it's getting better at saying yes to the things you really want to do, and no to the things that you're just about. We're like, okay. And that can be hard. And I struggle with this still. I still struggle with saying yes to too many things. I literally hate the word no, which is part of my problem. The word drives me nuts. Like, I think in terms of what's possible, not what's impossible. And so the word no is just like, but in turn, I've had to work at creating better boundaries, because I'll end up committing to too many things. And there's anybody familiar with the success paradox? Success paradox is pretty simple. It's the more success you have, the harder it is to become more successful, because you get distracted by success. So in many ways, the easiest it is to become successful is when you are not successful, because it's easier to focus on the one thing, right? And so as we become more successful, a lot of the times why people get trapped in good and they don't go to great, or they don't become phenomenal, is because they have enough success that it starts to distract them. And they suddenly, like, I see this a lot, especially with young with young entrepreneurs who their values and the drive for what they're doing isn't fully baked yet, or they're not fully they're not fully aware of it. They tend to seek success because they're things they want. And then when they get enough success to get what they want, they kill their golden egg, right? They kill the golden goose without realizing it. And so then they're confused, and they continue in this cycle that can cause a lot of pain. Whereas if you just double down and you get to a point where you can't fuck it up, life gets a lot easier. Or a lot of us don't get that far. We get just enough to where we're just off of survival. And I'll see people spend way more than they should on a vacation, or they'll spend way more. They'll start taking more vacations. They'll buy more things. All the shit that, in the depth of why I talk about this a lot, but in the depth of why, it's status. They get caught up in status because they now have the means to do it, and they collapse back down, which is the success paradox. The more successful I become, the harder it is to be successful. That's why I spend a lot of time studying successful people that are like successful decade in, decade out. And there isn't very many of them. There's a lot of shooting stars in business in general that were relevant for a year, 5 years, but there's very few that have been relevant for decades over decades. And you guys, I don't know if anybody's been paying attention to what happened with FTX and the young kid who lost fucking $28 billion when he went from $28 billion to down to 100,000. It was like, you start reading his story and you're reading how this happened. It was like, how did nobody see the writing on the wall? This was, pretty obvious just based on his lifestyle, the decisions he was making. And he blew up a $28 billion net worth. I said that with a B, 28 billion, which is why I continue to say wealth is not a possession, it is a mindset. And if you think like a child, no matter how successful you become, and no matter how propped up you are, if you do not grow the fuck out of that, you'll blow it up. And he did, irresponsibly. So I look at the guys who are successful year in, year out. What are they doing? How are they looking at their world? And I've shared this before, but I'll rip through it real quick for those who are taking notes because it's important. There are 4 traits to lasting success that come up over and over and over again among those who are that are relevant decade in, decade out. And that's how I think. It's like, not a shooting star. How do we look at life in decades? Which, again, if you're only a few decades old, you're like, how the fuck? That's a long tail reference. But trust me, as time goes on, decades are way less than they used to be. So, but there's 4 things. Number 1 is self-awareness. I've talked a lot about that, really doubling down on becoming more and more aware. What your business grows into resistance, that resistance tends to be your level of awareness. So as you in order to continue to up-level your business, you have to continue to expand your awareness, become consciously competent and consciously incompetent, where you understand what you're good at, what you're not good at, and where are your areas of resistance, and so that you can continue to expand and up-level. And so I've hit many ceilings in my business over the last 10 years and continue to. In the last few years, pandemic notwithstanding, I hit some heavy resistance and things that I'm having to up-level my leadership and how I'm showing up as a result of expansion and opportunity, going back to the success paradox. And some of this takes time and energy to do. But number 1, self-awareness is key. And just having a self-awareness practice, you get in that through meditation, time alone, asking a lot of questions, continually being a student. You don't ever, no matter how successful you become, don't ever lose the student mentality. There's always something that someone can teach you. And you can learn lessons from a 2-year-old, you can learn from anyone if you're willing to listen. But a lot of times we get to a place where we think we know more than we really do. And that's the beginning of the end, right? We become irrelevant. So that's number 1 is self-awareness. Number 2 is right along with that, always being a student. It's just being an agile learner, constantly learning and adapting to your market, to your environment, to economics changes. You don't ever want to get caught saying things like, well, that's the way we've always done it, or get caught thinking that we can go back to the past. A lot of times we look back. You see this a lot with people who work at plants or at mills or at a factory. Manufacturing jobs are leaving the United States. A lot of them are not coming back. There are a lot of people who are angry about that. And they're like, hey, bring these jobs back. And I'm like, they're not coming back. Change, grow, learn, find new ways to do things. And I understand it. For humans, that's really hard. For most humans, it's like change is not easy, right? We want things to stay the same, but it's a paradox because nothing stays the same, literally. There is nothing that, I mean, the constants in the universe are rare and far between. And one of them isn't the state of our bodies. Every cell in our body is replaced every 7 years. Everything is in change. It's always, and so there's something in us that strives for that, like control or the illusion of control, that we can keep things the same. And it's just not the case. You got to stay agile and continue to learn and grow and adapt. And the ability to endure and do that, I think, is, to me, that's the game, right? And I see just 12 years in our business, I get a certain pleasure in the endurance of success. And I've seen people come and go. I've seen guys come in, look amazing, think they're going to be amazing, and they just can't hang. They don't have the stamina. They don't have the discipline. They're shooting stars. So I think in terms of how do we sustain success? And that goes full circle to what I'm saying. When I was in Juanice's office, my first goal sheet, and I'll pause here if anybody has questions, but my first goal sheet, the theme was sustainable success. And, you know, everybody, I don't know if you guys do themes to your goals, but themes for my year, like, safe to say, most people had much more exciting themes than I did. You know, that doesn't sound very exciting, but that has always been a big push of my thought process. How do we sustain success? Right? That's be so good you can't be ignored. That's focusing on being the best, not being first, and doing things, thinking in terms of the long haul. So how do we do that? And then what are the characteristics of that? So anyway, for those who are keeping track and go, hey, you said there was 4 things. I'll finish this, and then you can ask questions.
Let me see if anyone can guess that for you.
Okay. Yeah, please.
Anyone can guess the last 2?
Communicate.
Yep.
Influence.
Yep.
Boom.
Be a great communicator, right? Continue to double down on communication, become effective at conveying your ideas, become effective at conveying your thoughts. I'm thinking about this, you know, this last year, we did just over a year now, but I decided to really get aggressive with social media, which for the first 10 years or so in the business, I was too busy building my business to care. And in some ways there was a benefit to that because I've been silently working on my craft and become, you know, an integrated practitioner to what I teach. Some of the downside to that is, you know, I could be much further along there and have a lot more influence had I started earlier, but everything happens for a reason. But my point is, obviously, to be fair, I started, you know, I think I was reading small group Bible studies when I was 11 years old. So I've been communicating for most of this lifetime, but over time, I've gotten effective at communicating because I do it constantly. So I get on social media and I don't think about it. There's no part of me that is considering or intentionally trying to communicate on social media. I'm just doing what I do. And the number one feedback I get from people outside of our business that listen to me, they're like, you're a phenomenal communicator. You communicate things in a way that is a clear message. And very direct. And I get that feedback constantly. And so the natural follow-up is, how do I get good at that? Right? How can I do what you do? And I don't, you know, I could sit, I guess, and take an active inventory of my skill sets and acknowledge, I think that I am probably a pretty good communicator, although there's always more to learn and I'm constantly working on my craft. But my answer is never very satisfying to people, I feel, because it's what do you think I tell them when I get asked that? I can barely hear you guys, but I didn't hear the word I was looking for.
You said public speaking?
Yeah, how do you get better at communicating?
You gotta
Keep practicing. Talk to people. Keep practicing.
Turns out when you ran morning meetings at least 5 days a week for fucking 10 years straight, ran a leaders meeting 3 days a week, 10 years straight, when you've done one-on-ones over and over, like, it's practice. It's practice. And I've taken more no's than most people have even attempted, right? Like it's just, you learn, you just do it. And you get better and better at your craft. If you're growing, that goes back to being an agile learner. If you're not constantly learning, well, hey, that conversation didn't go the way I wanted, or I didn't get the outcome I wanted there. Why? Right? In my opinion, you lose and you learn, and you either win or you learn, right? You figure it out, or you succeed, or you learn. That's your two options. It's okay to lose, just don't lose the lesson. So for me, being an effective communicator comes down to practicing constantly and making sure the message I'm trying to convey is being conveyed. And I guess it's given me a certain level of certainty or direction in the way that I speak that resonates with people as a result. So number 3 is being a great communicator, and then number 4 obviously is being a person of influence.
I'm going to take a little pause there, Sabs. I have a question, maybe out of the topic, but I remember, I think when I just started the business with you, this is 2017-ish. We were talking to you about like, bro, like we need to get you in social media. Like everyone was just like talking. But there was a part of you were just like so fucking locked in for exactly what you were doing. You take it, but you'd never get distracted. But now you started like probably like the last 2 years time.
Yep.
So I think one of the hardest part for any of us is to like stay locked in on that one track for a long amount of timeline, rather than just like, you know what, that kind of makes sense. I mean, those are the years we are bringing campaign cups like every quarter.
Correct.
Like this will be like, I mean, you're not running an ICL, you're just destroying an ICL.
Yep.
Right. So that would be a perfect time for anyone to jump into something else. But you were just like so locked in, and it was not even for like 6 months, 7 months. It was for like 3-4 years. And after that, you got into the social media platform.
Correct.
Like, I feel like that's kind of the hardest thing for us. I mean, even for me or like my leaders, like it's hard for stay locked in for one person, like one personal goal for like such a long time. Like, can you just give some, like, what are you using? What are your strategies? Like, because those are like 3, 5, 10 year, like big.
It's
big.
I mean,
timeline.
I talked about this on the org call: attention, focus, identity. Attention, focus, identity. And I can break that down a little bit here in a second, but we're in a society that is more distracted than any time in human history. And it gives you a competitive advantage if you realize that. And that was what I meant by longevity. Part of the reason why people don't succeed long-term and they don't have longevity is they can't stay focused long enough. The difference between running $1 million company and a $10 million company is not much. The difference between running a $10 million company and a $100 million company is not much. It's focus. And what you'll notice, and the more successful people by my terms that I run into, this goes back to something I'm saying, they're really good at saying no. They say no to most things. And here's the problem: the better you get, the more opportunities you have, because more people want your attention and they want what you have. Right? So for instance, you get really good at sales, you'll get, and I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have been approached in the store by somebody who's like, hey, come work with me in insurance, come work with me at whatever, fuck, because you get really good. Right? And the better you get, the more opportunities will come your way. You have to learn how to say no. And that only amplifies the more successful you get. The problem is it's much easier to get distracted. Right? And then you start to lose the thing that you lose your momentum and you get diffused. I was sharing this yesterday. It is true that most wealthy people have 7 streams of income. The part that gets missed in that is, with few exceptions, they got there with one stream. They built their empire by putting all of their energy into one thing and then diversifying once they get to a certain level. And so the goal is, and I do this with my students, and I talk about this a lot, is you want to pick a level 10 opportunity and then become a level 10 person. So level 10 opportunity is an opportunity that will get you, if you execute it well, will get you to your long-term goals. Right? And that once that's solidified and you know, hey, this vehicle will get me to my goals, then now all that's left for me to do is put all of my focus into becoming the level 10 person that is capable of manifesting this. And so, and the consulting part of my business and just coaching people, I see this a lot where somebody builds an okay business and then they try to do something else. Now that's really fucking hard. It's really hard to do multiple things at the same time, especially if none of them are really that good yet. So the process is better, right? Continue to improve the one thing you're doing, then do more of what you're doing, right? Get it really good, then do more of it, then do new things. And that is why I had a single focus for 10 years, get to senior national consultant. That was it. So I said no to a hell of, and to be fair, I should have said no to even more things than I did. But to Heshan's point, he's right. Like I said no to anything that didn't align.
There wasn't even a time that anything impulsed you, like, fuck it, let me try it.
Oh, I mean, listen, I was 6 months into the business. I was still a rep. I was on pace to make $50,000 that year. Okay, so the year, to give you some frame, the year before that, I think I made $280,000. So that was a big income drop that first year. And that back in my day, I know, I apologize, but like commission was like, I think I started, it was $35 an app, and then we went to $72 an app, and we were fucking pumped. So it was, the volume wasn't different. Our product, in some cases, production was higher then than it is now. We just got paid less, right? So if, a lot of times we, and I do, because there's no reason not to, but applaud guys whose wires are really big now. But if you really wanted to know who had the biggest chops, go look at production, meaning the amount of apps, not the amount of commission, because we pay a hell of a lot more than we used to. But production isn't necessarily higher. In some cases it is, to be fair, but I had a point to that. But so 6 months in, I'm with Juanis, and I get a phone call from a company that pulled my resume, and they said, hey, we'd like to have you come in and interview for a regional sales manager job. We think you'd be a shoo-in. And they were quoting something like, I think it was like $150,000 or maybe $180,000 in salary. And what they were projecting to be somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 in commission. So it was like back to what I made the year before. Well, okay. For a lot of people who are not solidified, they don't have clarity, they easily make that decision. Because what do? They go home and talk to their family and they go, hey, I'm working a 100% commission job right now, door to door. And yeah, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but I just got offered a job that pays 5 times more today, right? With a salary. Well, if you're highly influenced by your family, you're not making it out of that conversation. That seems like an obvious decision. Also why most people stay poor, for that exact reasoning. Now, I'm not saying there aren't opportunities that you don't want to take, right? I very much admire Elon Musk. There's things, not everything about him, but I love the human being that he's trying to be and how he shows up in the world, and his brutal honesty about shit. If he came to me and was like, hey, come work with me for the next 12 months, I'm going to need most of your time, but I'll teach you everything I know. I would find a way to I would definitely find a way to protect my business by bringing everything I'm learning to my business, into my organization. But I would drop most of my initiatives today to go do that, because the value add would be worth it. Right now, the chances of that happening at this point, probably pretty low. A few more years, probably not. I imagine at some point I will be doing business with him. But my point is like, there are opportunities that are worth evaluating in that stream, but it's not money usually. Right. And I didn't. Obviously, I said no. And my wife had my back, which was rad, because that's another one. We had a 1-year-old at home. And so for a lot of reasons, she would have been like, hey, that's a lot more money right now. And so, yeah, I could have taken it. I could have shifted. I see people do it all the time. I said, no, I'm committed to what I'm doing. I see the long haul of what I want. I don't want to work for somebody else. So in that scenario, the downsides is I'm a salaried W-2 employee with no clear way to own the company. And I'm still working for somebody else, and I'm doing sales in a business I didn't want to be in, right? There's just more money. So, and they sold collection software, right? If you guys remember what was happening right after 2008, the Great Recession, the American consumer got destroyed, and they were selling collection software to businesses to be able to effectively collect from the American consumer. I was like, fuck that. Because, not a business I want to be in. But I see people make those decisions all the time because they're just chasing money, right? And then I'm 2 years into the business now, and not quite, maybe No, I guess I was about 2 years into the business. And I went through what I dubbed the dark winter. Got down to a negative $187 in my bank account. I had not paid myself in 6 months. We went from 54 guys down to 14 guys. Those 14 guys, I had to fire all but 6 of them. Of the 6, I was only really excited about 3 of them. Right? Dark time for a lot of people. But if you would have been in my business then, you wouldn't have known that. You can ask, Daryl or Cole, like they were there. My brother was out by that time running his own business, but I was no less enthused. I was no less excited. I was no less certain about where I'm going. But again, opportunities come. People come like, hey, it seems like, you need some extra income, or you have another opportunity here, or like, you're really good at this. Why don't you try this? I'm like, I'm not. No. They say no. So much of success is learning to say no and stay focused on what the fuck you're about. And again, that's hard for a lot of people, especially because like, this is really interesting. If you guys caught what was happening, the great resignation, as it was called during the pandemic, people were flipping jobs to trying to make more money. The last stat, 68% of them regret doing that because they gave up culture, relationships, connections in the effort to make more money. And guess who's getting laid off now in droves? The same group, because layoffs, not always, but very generally, layoffs happen in reverse order from when you started. So the newest employees get laid off first. That isn't always the case, but very commonly the case. Well, why? The grass is always greener on the other side, right? Well, make the fucking grass green where you're at. As long as you're in a good, viable position with great opportunity, and if you don't, what happens is the same resistance, whatever your cap was, is going to go wherever you go. And that's what you find out. It's like, oh, fuck, the cap was me. And unless you're at the very, very top and you have absolutely exploited everything you can within your industry and you have maxed out that opportunity, then it's just you. So anyway, I learned to say no. Now I have a new ceiling because, Heshan, I have many different roles, and that's become more complicated. I'm not potent at everything the way I used to be because I'm trying to do more things than I used to. And so I'm growing into a new version of myself. So I feel like I'm a chrysalis, right? Which is a butterfly before it breaks out of the fucking cocoon. I feel like I'm about to break out on a new evolution of myself. And it will be clear as the next couple of years go on, like, oh, this is a whole new updated version of Sabs. Because I've been going through a lot of personal change as my business has grown, as I have grown as an individual, as a family. So it demands a new level of me. And so I'm continually upgrading and growing, but I'm having to learn to say no even more. And so, yes, I'm getting aggressive with social media, but as I'm sure you guys recognize more than anyone else, almost all of my social media presence right now is simply repurposed content. It's leaders meetings and alpha meetings repurposed. And it's incredibly validating. I think we just crossed 500,000 on TikTok, 300,000 on Instagram, which tells me there's a lot of people that are really enjoying the message that I've been teaching 10 years to our team in a completely different environment. But I still haven't gone into, and I'm going to next year, creating content that is directed solely at my followers. Right now, most of it is all repurposed, meaning it isn't taking a fuck ton of my time and energy at this point to do that. All right. Anyway, thoughts, questions, more questions, Heshan?
Yeah. Let's do a little Q&A. I'll give you one more rapid fire question, and after that, we're gonna go to Q&A. Okay. Your Super Bowl prediction for 2023.
Super Bowl prediction. What? Just one?
2 teams. The Super Bowl. Who's gonna play the Super Bowl?
San Francisco. I wish that wasn't true, but I can remain objective. For those who don't know, San Francisco's in the Seahawks division, and I wish I could say we're the better team, but I think the Seahawks. I love the Seahawks, and they're showing that they're way better than what people thought this year. And I'm never counting us out. To be fair, like we know we've actually have San Francisco's number historically, although they whooped our ass earlier this year. But they're a pretty complete team that's very well coached. So I think San Francisco out of the NFC, which is not a popular pick, over Philadelphia, was obviously looks by the record the best team in NFL, or probably the NFL, but best team in the NFC for sure. Out of the AFC, this is tough. It's very hard to count the Chiefs out. They look good, but the Bills look pretty unstoppable right now. And Miami could be a wild card, but I'm going to go with San Francisco Bills. Super Bowl.
San Francisco and Bills. Oh, All right, nice. All right, guys, let's do 3 questions. Whoever has questions. Any question, doesn't have to be goals, anything that you want to ask Sabs. It's a busy guy, so while we have him, let's make sure we'll get all the questions out of the way. Candice.
Okay, how are you planning for 2023 and how are you preparing your team for the economy?
How am I preparing for 2023? I heard that part, and then how I missed the last part of the question.
How are you preparing your team for the economy in 2023?
Well, I'm expecting a likely a pretty aggressive recession. I could be wrong. I'm certainly not alone in that prediction. It seems like, that's a very common vibe. A lot of the big financial analysts and big brokerage houses are all looking at the data and going, we're likely going into a recession. Now, the American consumer is strong because specifically real estate has stayed strong, and most people have equity in their homes, that people who own homes. And so, and people are making more money across the board. People are making more money. So there are some underlying positives, and we could get a soft landing where it's a mild recession, but combination of just legislation, global economic shit that's going on, and then the rumbling tensions in the world, I think we're likely going to be going into a pretty tough time of uncertainty. And so that's going to be tough for a lot of people. Thankfully for us, we generally do well in recessions on all fronts. First of all, we're involved on the front end of the business. Sales is how you pay the bills. So even in recessions, maybe even more so in recessions, especially the companies we work for, they want more people, not less. Right. And so what they end up doing is laying off more and more of their internal teams and giving more and more of it to us. And I've gone through, this will be my 3rd recession. I came in right at the end of one, and then we went through the pandemic induced one, and I think we'll get the reset that we were all needing before this time. And there's a combination of things that happen. One, people want to save money. So switch and save, which is a big part of our model, works. And the big boys get that. So, the AT&Ts of the world price themselves competitively because they get that that's the time to grab market share, because people want to save money. So offers get more aggressive. And AT&T for their part is very smart at their offers are designed to be a good fit for about 60% of the people. It varies some, but between 60 and 80% of the people, depending on the time of year, the switch and save model works. And so in recessions, when people are trying to save money, it's a great time for big companies with good balance sheets to go out and spend money to make more money. There are very few companies that have been around as long as AT&T. You don't last this long as a company if you are not very smart and knowing how to endure recessions. And they do. They're smart. And they get aggressive and grow. They're doubling down right now and getting more aggressive. And their number one initiative is EDM. And everything AT&T will be going EDM in time. Like I don't think probably, I don't know if it'll happen next year, but very soon, their AT&T and Direct, the whole thing will merge. It'll all be one. Everything is going to be EDM as a whole. And that's their big, they mentioned on their quarterly earnings call, that was a big part of their initiative, and we're number one at the top of that. So that's pretty exciting. So from a business standpoint, we tend to do very well in recessions. And what makes recessions scary for people is they're afraid of losing their job, right? It's not happening, right? We've never laid up, barring fucking 14 days to flatten the curve. Other than that shit, we've never had to lay anybody off or slow down hiring at all. Right. So that's the uncertainty around recession scares people because they think they're going to lose their job. And that's what gets scary. But things get cheaper during recessions, not more expensive. Right. So for those who are in position, they can take advantage of that. You know, people will fire sale cars, fire sale properties, people who weren't smart with their money and they were, you know, summer babies, I call them, the people who made all their money in the summer and don't know how to last through a winter. Well, when they start getting hit, they start liquidating things quick, and they don't have a value of assets because it all rose so quick. They don't quite get it. So there'll be lots of opportunities to pick up properties, cars, whatever assets for cheap. So if you're in position for that, great. Now, what I would do, and I talked about this a few times on a couple different calls, but this is a good time to, you know, to look at your money, figure out how to budget, save money, reduce subscriptions, things that you don't need, so that you have money to take advantage of what's coming. Also, it is a great time to be in sales. And I don't like, especially early life, I don't know, for the most people, I don't know a better opportunity than sales, because sales leads into so many other things and gives you so many different opportunities. And it's one of the few things you can do where it's like, if I had a job and let's say I was making even $80,000 a year, right? Or say $2,000 a week. What is that? $100,000 a year. Okay. Well, some may say that's good money, but if I had no way to make more than that, that would neg me the fuck out. Because you never know what's going to happen. Where like, if you're in a sales position and it's like, fuck, I need a new car or I need a new roommate. Oh, okay, I just got to go sell more this week. You actually have a path to making more money to take care of your bills. It's built into it. Like, imagine a fixed income situation. And I learned this as an 11-year-old kid because one summer I started a BlackBerry business and I made more money that summer than my mom did. And I was like 11, 12 years old. And she worked for a good company, worked for our good guy, a dentist, and he took care of us, took care of our family. But she had no way to make more money. No matter how hard she worked, she had an agreed upon salary. I'm like, who the fuck? Why would you do that? Right? Like, sales is just if you're good at sales, it's a much more viable way to take care of yourself, because you can make more money. You can double or triple your income if you just get really good at what you do. An unfortunate thing is if you come in with an employee mindset and you come in like, I want to trade hours for a paycheck, you'll never get there. You got to think like an entrepreneur, which is where most people get stuck. So I'm preparing for that. Also, people lose their jobs. They get pissed off at big corporations because they were just a number and they got I don't know if you guys catch headlines, but right before Thanksgiving, big company just text, like 10% of their workforce and said you're laid off right before Thanksgiving. A text. Right? Like, fuck, right? Well, it was a mass text, but yeah, but it's just like, are you serious? And this is happening everywhere. So then guys go, well, fuck that. I don't want to work for a big company that just sees me as a number. So what do they want to do? They're looking for something entrepreneurial. If you look right now, the amount of Google searches for entrepreneurial opportunities is growing through the roof. It's like skyrocketing, and the emphasis back on running your own business. And because people are getting smart, they're looking at the tax code and they go, the tax code is not set up to be, if you want wealth, you're not going to get to wealth being an employee. You get to wealth by being a business person, because the tax code is set up to protect businesses, which makes sense because businesses run the economy, they create jobs, and the whole economy is built on growth. You need businesses to do that. So you can either hate the game or you can play the game, but figure it out. So, and then, you know, maybe you change the game along the way. So those are things that I'm thinking about. And then as far as goals go, there's 3 layers. You have your massive transformational purposes, right? Those are your reasons for being here. My big reasons for being here on Earth. Like, what is that? For me, it's to help humanity ascend, which maybe sounds like a either very vague or grandiose statement, but that's essentially what it is. My hard goals are, what are the 3 to 5 year goals that I have to get there, to live that, right? So I'm going to start writing this year. I'm really excited about that. Hopefully my first book will be out by the end of 2023. So building a national sales organization that leads, trains, and equips entrepreneurs, huge part of my initiative, big part of what I do. Those are hard goals. Then I create clear daily goals that are aligned with getting to those hard goals. So you got your big goals, and then you got your daily actions that help you get there. Now, in the early part of our game, you don't have to get fucking creative or try to create daily goals. It's pretty fucking clear what you have to do. It's more connect the dots. It's just execute, which makes it in many ways really beautiful. You don't have to fucking try to figure it out all on your own. It's there for you. And then you just work backwards. Once you know where hey, here's where I want to end up at the end of 2023, work backwards. Well, what do I have to do today to get there? And then more importantly, who do I need to become to get there? Right? So a lot of us focus on end result. We don't focus on competency. So we focus on, hey, here's where I want to be a year from now, but we're not spending nearly enough time going, who do I need to be to get there? It's an identity question. Because if you didn't need to be something different than you are now, you'd already be there. So the question is, well, what do I need to do differently? What are the competencies I need to get really fucking good at to get to this goal? Right? And then once you figure that out, who do I need to be to get to this goal? What competencies do I need to get to this goal? Then it's simply the identity question. Every day, what would somebody who's at this goal or at this position do right now? Right? You invoke the identity tied to that. What would I do? The person that wants to hit this goal, what would they do today? I want to be an owner today. What would I do today? When I take that one-on-one with my new guy, would I take him to breakfast, or would I go home? And that's really what I want to do. Or I don't want to work fucking on a Tuesday. I don't want to have a one-on-one. I want to check out. Right? Or do I pitch 5 more customers, or do I go home and be okay with not hitting my goal? Do I take that interview, or do I complain that I don't want to have an interview today because I have to go fucking run errands before I go to the field or some stupid shit? Right? Well, what is the person that is serious about those goals? What would they do? Right? It's that simple. And that's, as a coach, that's what I'm always working at, as a mirror to go, hey, if this is what you want, this is who you have to become. And so all of my coaching, and this gets missed sometimes on social media and even in my leaders meetings, my coaching assumes, until I hear otherwise, that your intention is to be somebody who is financially free, who runs their own business. So that's the end in which I'm coaching. Like, hey, I know what is necessary. I know exactly what skills and competency it takes to be able to effectively do that. So I'm coaching to that end. And so my content, the direction, and the accountability is to remind the person of that identity. Here's the identity of somebody who does that. Right? And so much of success isn't being taught, it's being reminded. Right? Especially in our business, like you get to a point where you're not going to hear a lot of new content relative to where you are. You just need to be reminded of the content you already know, and to become the person, to have the identity that's tied to that. Right? I'm going to become this person. So it's more reminding than taught, which is why, ask Heshan or anybody, we repeat ourselves over and over and over and over again. And I, for one, can tell you, it's not because I like repeating myself. Right? It's not because I just or I only have this very small spectrum of content that I know what to talk about. There is a lot of shit that I really love talking about that I don't get to fucking talk about because it doesn't really suit where we're at. And so who do we need to become in process of hitting these goals? What are the competencies we need to learn? Competency-based goals, not results-based goals.
Mic drop. All right, brother. Appreciate you joining us. All right, guys. You can say thank
Appreciate you guys. Excited to see you at the yacht party.
Call your shots if you are seeing him in the yacht party.
Top 50.
Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Let's get it.
See you guys.
See
Thanks,
ya.
bro.
All right.